Good morning, Janice.
Good morning, Anthony.
Today, let's talk about how to deal with a nightmare tenant in probate. So, I think most people who have any dealings with investment real estate know that just one bad tenant can blow up a whole real estate investment portfolio. I mean, just one nightmare tenant can throw all your numbers out of whack. Yeah.
Yeah.
And being a professional executor and having seen and supervised and controlled a lot of real estate and a lot of landlord type situations has really given me firsthand knowledge and experience on just how bad a nightmare tenant can be.
It's definitely fun. That was sarcasm. So today we will discuss which estates have nightmare tenants, what are nightmare tenants, and what to do about bad tenants.
Cool. Let's jump into it. So the first question is, which estates have bad tenants or nightmare tenants? That's a trick question. It's all estates.
Yeah, this one's my favorite. So allow me to interject for a minute. So we had a client once and we were on a call and, we thought it might go one way, but you're like, no, it'll be a bad tenant. And you were very confident. No, it will be a bad tenant. And I said, well, how do you know, Anthony? Well, not my first rodeo, but it's going to be a bad tenant. And sure enough, it was a bad tenant.
I feel like Cassandra sometimes, and I don't like that feeling. I think she's from Greek mythology where she's cursed with seeing the future, but nobody believes her.
Yep. That would be Anthony Park when it comes to bad tenants.
So I don't know what it is, but we see it over and over and over again. Tenants who were like friends with the landlord, paid every rent on time for decades, cleaned up, maintained the property, they suddenly turn into jerks when the owner dies. Yeah. I mean, we've seen it so many times. And I don't mean like they're bad people. I mean, I kind of think in some ways they are, but suddenly they feel no responsibility for paying their rent or doing anything, in that landlord-tenant relationship. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So moving on. So what do I mean? What do you mean by they become jerks or,
Yeah, please do explain.
So the worst case scenario, this one is a little bit more rare, but it does happen, is when they just completely trash the place. We've had properties where they did pulling the copper out of the walls. I mean, it's just, I couldn't believe it, right? They literally stripped the property on their way out. We've had places turned into literal crack houses, like literal, with the drug paraphernalia and the human feces and just
lovely,
really lovely stuff.
Makes for a great resale.
Oh yeah. Pretty disgusting stuff. But that's okay. I'm going to point out that's not the norm. We have seen it happen, but that is not the norm. What normally happens is tenants just stop paying but keep living. That's the bottom line. So we have tenants bounce their rent checks with very casually. Let's put it. Hey, here's a check.
Yeah, checks bounce in the mail.
And what are you gonna do about that?
Yeah. Oops.
And by the way,
I'll send you another one.
Yeah, bounce checks cause real headaches for us accounting the estate, so that's kind of a pain for us. I'm sure it does for everyone, but for an estate, it's not good to have that on your books.
No, because now you have fees for the bounce check. So it's not just the check and the inconvenience. You've got extra fees. Now you've just paid for their check.
Then we had the guy up in Ossining, New York. Very nice guy. He was a family. I mean, just like a totally normal, like, I'm not, you might be wondering, are these like some kind of like, real low lives or low class? These are all normal people who just suddenly become like jerks. So really nice family up in Ossining, New York. And at first, everything was normal, as they had been when the owner was living. But then after the second check they sent to the estate, it became, they missed the payment. And when we called and said, hey, we didn't receive your check, do you mind resending it? The response was, oh, yeah. We're going to send that when we can. That's not how rent works.
Wait, what? Could you imagine calling your mortgage company and telling them that, oh, well, I'm just going to pay you when I can?
Now, I mean, just to step back for a second, we do have the option of, going down the credit reporting path and, kind of making things bad for them. But that's not why we're here. We're in a state. We're trying to just get out of this situation. We're not trying to fight a battle with anyone. So, very rarely do we even pursue that. But I mean, the fact that it needs to get to that point is just, yeah. Why
Yeah.
are they being jerks? Yeah.
Why are we here at this point? Right.
Now, the real problem, I mean, even if the tenant stops paying but has committed to leave and actually leaves, that's actually not even that bad. I mean, given the reality of the situation. But the real problem is when they stop paying and they won't leave. And this is the one that happens the most. So, okay, if for anyone who's not familiar with New York or real estate law, the reason this is so problematic is it is really hard to evict somebody in New York. Like
It's really hard anywhere. It's hard.
Okay.
Everywhere.
The laws are very, very, very tenant friendly. I mean, I guess maybe the pendulum has swung, and maybe in the past, slumlords really, really were able to kind of take advantage of tenants. I have no idea about the history of the legislation, but as of the past decade or so, probably even longer, like tenants can get away with a lot before landlords can do anything.
Absolutely agree. Yes.
Yeah. So you have somebody who's not paying and who won't leave. So what that puts the estate in a situation, which is human beings, by the way. These are people who are mourning the passing of a family member and just want to move on with their lives. But again, jerks.
Right.
So it puts the family in the situation where they're paying money, real estate tax, water bills, maybe even a mortgage, maintenance, to maintain the property, but they're not getting any income in. And it becomes a huge liability and just a financial strain as this thing drags on and on and on. But then we get the fake offers.
Those are my favorite too. Yeah.
I think this falls in the category of won't leave and drags it out. Meaning, it feels like every tenant who's lived in a property a long time, when the owner passes away, they say, "Oh, I'll just buy it. Can I just buy it? Because I've lived here a long time and I would like to stay." So I'm like, "That's cool. You can either rent from the new owner or I'd like to buy." Okay. But
Sure.
invariably, how much do you have for a down payment? Oh, what's the down payment? I don't have any money.
Wait, you have to actually pay for the house? I don't understand.
Or let me check my credit. 400 is a good score, right?
Yeah, right? Isn't it? No.
400 is like a lot more than 100, so that's got to be good. Anyway, you get a lot of characters. So yeah, you get these. I don't mean that they're fake and that they're lying, but they're, let's call them, very, 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 very unrealistic offers to buy that property.
Yes, yes.
All right. So that's just basically another way of delaying leaving, right? And then we have the dragging out the eviction process. And what that means is you have folks who know just enough law or just enough of how to pull the judge's heartstrings or, spin a sob story to stay in the property another 3 months, another 6 months, another however long. Again, not paying a dime during that time. All right. Are you having fun, Janice, getting...
I am, because this is always entertaining to me that I go back to the mortgage. Like, it's the same type of thing. Would you call the mortgage company and say, I'm just going to live here for the next little while. Yeah, I'd like you to pay the electric and the utilities. I'll pay if I feel like it, but I'm not going to really try. I mean, it is mind-boggling to me. But I don't know. It just seems to happen when people pass that are the landlords, right? I mean,
very
I guess
often.
Right.
So before I jump into the, what to do about these bad tenants, I'm going to digress a little bit for a non-estate story, just because it's hilarious to me.
Yes.
So my buddy owned a piece of real estate in Queens, I don't know, Flushing or Bayside, and he was renting it out to this guy. And then the guy said, he just moved in like a month ago, but he said, look, it's actually not working out, and I don't think I can afford the rent. Do you mind? I mean, is there any way I can break the lease and just leave, 1 month in instead of waiting the whole tenancy? Which normally, you don't really do. But my friend was like, okay, seems like a guy hard on his luck, so they broke the lease.
Okay.
So my buddy goes to check out the situation a couple of weeks later, and he sees that the guy's stuff is still there, right?
After he's broken the lease. Okay.
Correct.
Right.
And purportedly left. So he calls the guy and says, hey, man, like, I thought you were leaving. And he says, yeah, I did. I'm only staying there like 1 or 2 nights a week.
Oh, wait. What?
That doesn't count, right?
So, okay.
And in that case, it took my buddy months to evict him. Again, another example of how hard it is to get rid of people.
So wow, that's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. All right. So what to do about these bad tenants? What to do about them? Okay.
Yeah. Now we know that they do this. How do we fix it?
So number one, start the eviction process immediately.
Okay.
Time is not on your side. Even if everything breaks your way and everything you have the best of luck, there's no delays, it's going to take months, at least 6 months or so. So and by the way, that never happens. So you want to start the process immediately. There's things like 30-day notice, 60-day notice, all these notices and timelines you have to get started. So start them immediately.
And I go back to that initial conversation that I said that we had on the phone where you're like, no, it's going to be a bad tenant. Yeah. And you're like, no, I'm certain. We're going to start the timer now. Like we're by the time you catch up and realize that I'm right, we would have wasted like 3 months. So we're just going to go ahead and start now. I mean, I'm dumbing that down a little bit, but you knew what was coming.
So I know it's going to feel weird for the clients or for the heirs. So look, in one case, the tenant came to the funeral and I held hands with the family and expressed their condolences and had paid rent the whole time. So it's like that's pretty rough to send them an eviction notice right now. Right?
Yeah.
And I agree. But make me the bad guy then, because exactly. You need to get that clock rolling immediately because that same person who went to the funeral and held hands with the family was a total nightmare at the end of the day and was alleging civil rights violations and would not leave the place. It was crazy. You can also negotiate a tenant buyout. And I know this doesn't feel great. It doesn't apply every time, but it's where you offer a lump sum of money to this, jerk of a tenant to leave. And I know it seems counterintuitive, like he's not paying, but I'm paying him more money to leave, but it's a simple cost-benefit analysis. So if you're not receiving rent and you're paying a couple $1,000 a month in tax or water or maintenance, you're basically losing money every month this thing drags out. So it might be worth it to just pay to end it now. Does that make sense?
It does, because if you, like you said, if you're paying a couple $100 for the utilities and taxes and such, you're actually paying out quite a bit for them to live there.
Yeah. So it's basically understanding that time matters a lot in these estates because you're bleeding money every month that it drags out. So it's basically like stop the bleeding, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
So my last tip on how to deal with these terrible tenants, and this is hard, this is very psychological, but just try your best to ignore the injustice of the situation.
I know it's hard, but yeah.
Because you're going to have somebody who's going to not pay for months, maybe even years of rent-free living, and on top of that, receive a buyout to actually finally leave. And I've been part of this several times, and my clients or the heirs are like, no way, not just on principle, we're not going to let this happen. I'm like, then my response is just on principle, you're going to lose thousands more, dragging it out further. Like, is it
I like
Yeah.
what you said, it's a cost-benefit analysis. Okay, so using your description of $5,000, if we add it up over the course of a few months, how much more will you spend on utilities and such to keep them in there?
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to look at it, is that cost-benefit.
So unfortunately, we've been down this road way too many times, and hopefully, these tips help somebody deal with this in the future, or at least avoid these problems in the future.
Absolutely. And always say, check out Anthony's book, How Probate Works, on Amazon. It has a lot of information on these are the types of things you can run into when dealing with probate.
So we've had a couple of episodes in a row now where we've talked about some of the negatives of probate and how to avoid them. So hopefully we come up with some more positive topics coming up.
Absolutely. But again, I think we're doing it just so we can just help that one person that may do something, and if we can just help out now, it'll make it easier in the long run for them.
Cool. A great way of looking at it. All right. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thanks, Janice, and we'll talk next time.
We'll talk soon.
Bye now.